The Keepers Lament. The crisp air of autumn brushed against my face as I stood on the rocky shore of Maine's coast, gazing out at the vast, glittering expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The fiery reds, oranges, and yellows of the surrounding trees contrasted beautifully with the deep blue of the water. Waves crashed against the rocks below, sending up a fine mist that sparkled in the soft light of the late afternoon sun. The scene was breathtaking, yet it held a melancholic beauty that resonated with the quiet sadness I carried within me. It had been nearly 5 years since the accident that had taken Tom from me, leaving me alone in the world, a young widow with a heart full of shattered dreams. Since that terrible day, I had been lost, drifting through life like a ship without a rudder. My mother, ever the practical woman, urged me to seek counseling, to find a way to cope with the crushing grief that threatened to drown me. Eventually, I gave in to her pleas and started seeing a therapist. Slowly, with the help of therapy, I began to understand that holding on to the past so tightly was preventing me from moving forward. My therapist suggested that staying in the old house was hindering my ability to find peace. It was a hard truth to swallow, but deep down, I knew it was true. That was when the dreams began. Night after night, I found myself standing before a lighthouse, its weathered stones rising majestically against the backdrop of a starry sky. The lighthouse perched on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a churning sea, its beam of light cutting through the darkness. In the dream, I always felt a profound sense of familiarity, as if I had been there before. I had assumed it was a memory from a trip I had taken with Tom when we were first married, but the details were hazy, elusive. The dreams became more frequent, more vivid, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the lighthouse was calling to me, drawing me in. One evening, as I browsed the internet aimlessly, something caught my eye. An advertisement for a program that auctioned off decommissioned lighthouses through the National Historic Lighthouse Preservation Act. Curious, I clicked on the link and began scrolling through the listings. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. The lighthouse from my dreams, located on a small island off the coast of Maine. The accompanying photos showed a charming 6-bedroom cottage nearby, the perfect size for a bed and breakfast. The idea of starting fresh in such a place was alluring, and I felt an inexplicable pull toward the property, as if fate were guiding my hand. Without hesitation, I put in an offer, sold my house in Virginia, and made arrangements to move to Maine. The moment I set foot on the island, I felt a strange sense of belonging. The lighthouse stood tall and silent, its exterior worn by years of exposure to the elements. The cottage, too, had an old-world charm, with its white clapboard siding and dark green shutters. A few days after settling in, I went to the nearby village to buy supplies. As I perused the shelves of a quaint general store, an old man struck up a conversation with me. He introduced himself as Jack, a local fisherman who had lived in the area his entire life. Jack was widowed, like me, and had grown up in a lighthouse similar to mine. When he learned that I was the new owner of the lighthouse, he offered his handyman services and knowledge, knowing that maintaining such a property could be daunting for someone unfamiliar with it. Grateful for the company and the help, I accepted his offer. Over the next few weeks, Jack became a regular presence at the lighthouse. We spent hours together, working on repairs and sharing meals. I found myself drawn to him, and a quiet, tentative romance began to blossom. Jack's steady, comforting presence was like a balm to my wounded heart, and for the first time since Tom's death, I began to feel a sense of peace. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, strange occurrences began to trouble me. At night, I would hear whispers carried on the wind, voices that seemed to come from the lighthouse itself. The beam of light, long since deactivated, would flicker to life on its own, casting eerie shadows across the island. I often woke in the middle of the night, drawn to the window by an inexplicable urge to gaze at the lighthouse's darkened silhouette. On several occasions, I thought I saw a figure standing by the lighthouse, watching me from the shadows. But whenever I approached, there was no one there. The dreams continued, but they grew darker. The lighthouse, once a beacon of hope in my dreams, now loomed ominously, its light revealing a figure within, a man whose face was obscured by shadows. My unease grew, but I tried to dismiss it, attributing the visions to the stress of the move and my lingering grief. One evening, as I sat by the fire in the cottage, I began to doze off, lulled by the warmth and the crackling of the flames. As I drifted into sleep, I felt a cold hand brush against my cheek. My eyes snapped open, and I found myself staring into the face of a man, Tom's face, pale and ghostly, with eyes that burned with an otherworldly light. "Lydia?" he whispered, his voice echoing with a sadness that mirrored my own. "I've been waiting for you." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the truth, but something was wrong. This didn't feel like Tom. His voice, his touch, it was all wrong. The figure before me began to twist and contort, his face shifting into that of another man, one I didn't recognize but whose malevolence was bone-chilling. I recoiled in horror as the figure's hand tightened around my wrist. "You belong to me now," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. Panicking, I tore myself away from the apparition and ran to the lighthouse. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, driving me up the spiraling staircase to the widow's walk. The wind howled around me as I stepped out into the cold night air, the dark sea crashing below. I stood on the edge, transfixed by the swirling waves beneath me. The figure was in my mind now, urging me to jump, to join him in the cold depths. Just as I began to lean forward, strong arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me back from the brink. Jack's voice cut through the fog in my mind, calling my name over and over. Slowly, the trance lifted, and I collapsed into his arms, shaking and sobbing. In the safety of the cottage, Jack held me close as I recounted the terrifying encounter. He listened, his face growing pale as I described the man who had haunted my dreams and tried to claim my life. Jack explained that the lighthouse had a dark history. Decades ago, an escaped convict had sought refuge there after fleeing prison. The lighthouse keeper, discovering the fugitive, threatened to call the authorities, but the convict killed him in cold blood. Before the convict could escape, the Coast Guard and village police arrived, leading to a deadly standoff. The convict met his end at the lighthouse, but his spirit had never left, bound to the place by his violent death. The ghost had been using my grief and vulnerability to manipulate me, drawing me to the lighthouse in an attempt to claim my soul. But Jack's timely intervention had saved me. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I knew I had to make a choice. I could leave the island and try to forget, or I could stay and face the darkness that had nearly consumed me. With Jack by my side, I chose to stay. Together, we worked to cleanse the lighthouse of its dark past, determined to bring light back to the island. The process was long and difficult, but with each passing day, the malevolent presence grew weaker. In the end, I found not only a new home, but also a new love, a love that helped me finally lay the ghosts of my past to rest. Yet as I stood on the widow's walk one last time, hand in hand with Jack, I felt a faint icy breath against my neck, and a soft whisper echoed from the lighthouse below. "I'll be waiting."